People in blue zones suffer the same stress as we do, but what they have are sacred daily rituals that unwind that stress. The Okinawans have this beautiful practice of ancestor veneration. The Adventists pray, which is like a meditation. The Costa Ricans and the Ikarians, very fastidious about a nap. Naps are very powerful ways to de-stress.
Most of us are chasing longevity in a modern, stressful, toxic, disconnected environment. We're listening to tech bros tell us about peptides and workouts and saunas. And while that all may add a few years, unless we change the environment and how we relate to each other, our lives may not be worth extending. My guest today, Dan Buettner, a curious adventurer and explorer like myself, has spent decades uncovering the daily rituals, diets, and mindsets of the world's happiest, healthiest, and longest living people. From his New York Times best-selling books on the Blue Zones and maniacally delicious Blue Zone cookbooks, to his popular Netflix show Live to 100, Secrets of the Blue Zones, Dan is an expert in what increases the quantity and quality of our years. In this conversation, we explore what really heals us: community, purpose, laughter, whole foods from the earth, natural movement, to name a few, and how the 5 people we choose to spend the most time with can literally add or subtract years from our lives. I know my 5 people. How are yours looking? Let's dive in. Dan, welcome.
I'm delighted to be here.
So, a couple rapid fire questions. Is health something only for the wealthy these days?
No. In fact, in blue zones, people are poor and they're healthier than we are.
Love it. We're going to dive into that one for sure. These amazing one-pot meals. What is your favorite dish?
It's a minestrone made by the longest lived family in the history of the world. I eat it every day.
Wow. Okay, I need to get on that program. Favorite cheat food?
Nuts.
Nuts. That's not a cheat food. Is that a cheat food?
Well, it's a cheat for a snack because I try not to snack. But cheat, pizza.
Yes. Man after my own heart. If you could only do one thing of the Blue Zone kind of philosophy, what do you think is at the top of the hierarchy of importance?
Curate your immediate social circle. The people you let in the room with you. Pay extra attention to who you let in.
Why?
Because friends have a measurable impact on your behaviors, on what you're going to do unconsciously for a long time. Whereas diets don't really last that long, and exercise programs, friends are long-term adventures. And toxic friends tend to make you feel toxic as well. Loneliness, unhappiness, obesity, they're all measurably contagious.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right. So Blue Zones. Tell us how you're an explorer.
Yes.
You cycled all over the world. You broke Guinness records. You're an explorer at heart, an adventurer. How did you end up chasing the Blue Zones and interested in that?
So I've been an explorer since college and was always kind of hovering National Geographic. At one point, I biked across 5 continents and the editors over there, they liked what I did, but they said, we're more interested these days in expeditions that add to the body of knowledge. So I started on a series of expeditions. I actually lived here in the beach cities. Started a company that harnessed the intuitive power of the internet and the crowdsourced wisdom to solve ancient mysteries, like why the Maya civilization collapsed and did Marco Polo go to China, et cetera. And I stumbled upon an article in the World Health Organization journal that showed there was a little cluster of islands in Southeast Asia where people have the longest disability-free lives in the world. And I said, aha, now there's a good mystery. And I reasoned that there has to be some cluster of factors that we could learn from. And in 1999, I took a team. We spent 2 weeks in Okinawa, and I teased out enough of the mystery that it just exploded for us, for our web. Back then everybody's on the World Wide Web, the information superhighway.
Dial-up.
Yeah, that's right. We were kind of AOL-ish. And that really got me interested. First professionally, but then personally. And in 2002, I got a grant from the National Institutes on Aging, and then a big assignment from National Geographic.
Which is your goal. That was like your bucket list.
It was a professional goal. I mean, in my line of work, it's like if you can land a cover story on National Geographic, you've won the Oscar awards of exploration.
That's cool.
So that was my goal.
That's amazing. So you lived, I don't know if this is back in 1999, but I loved when you told the story that you lived with this Okinawa woman,
Yeah.
this centenarian, for 3 days and just kind of observed because you didn't speak the same language. I love that experience, just the full immersion.
I have to give credit to my editor, Peter Miller, who gave me the advice to just sit with a centenarian and observe. He told me this great story about Jane Goodall, and that for writing, just saying things is not nearly as strong as if you can find a character who does something that shows. So the anecdote that he gave me is he was profiling Jane Goodall, spent several days with her, and they were sitting watching chimpanzees for hours on end. It was kind of boring, and he was quietly taking notes. And at a certain point, a caterpillar dropped down on Jane's shoulder, and instead of flicking away like a lot of people would do, she gently took the caterpillar, put it in her hand, and then observed it for several long moments and watched it wreathe and watched it turn over, watched its little hairs, and then she gently put it down and let it go on its way. And that told more about Jane Goodall than saying, Jane is an observant scientist who's compassionate about animals. That little anecdote said it all. So my version of that was to move in with a 104-year-old woman in northern Okinawa. And she lived in a raised hut, sat on a tatami mat. She had a garden. Every morning she'd wake up and make miso soup. And I remember after making this, she made it for both of us. It was just vegetable miso soup. So right there, you see, this is what she's having for breakfast. And then after that, she went and washed the two bowls. And at the end of washing her two bowls, she pulled out her dentures and washed those two with the same thing, put them back in. But the most important insight, I watched her for 3 days get up and down off the mat over 30 times a day. And when you start looking at why Okinawan women are living so long, you realize that they're not dying from falls. The fifth biggest killer of older people are falling down and breaking a hip or another major bone, and they die within a year. If you fall down and break your hip at age 50, there's a 25% chance you'll be dead at the end of the year.
Whoa.
This woman had incredible lower body strength and incredible lower body balance. Because she went to the gym? No, because she simply got up and down off the ground 30 times a day. And, we sit on these comfortable chairs and couches and, we never sit on the floor. That was aha.
Yeah, I mean, as you're talking, it's like, and I've said this many times, but it feels like the comforts and conveniences that we're all seeking in modern society are actually what's killing us.
Yes.
And making us sick.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, comforts and convenience. So for most of human history, we've lived in an environment of scarcity and hardship, and we had to work really hard to feed ourselves. We had to work really hard to keep ourselves warm, depending on the climate. We had to work really hard to defend ourselves, and now we've engineered our lives to. There's for every American, there's 4,300 calories a day for us to eat. That's how much is produced. We live in environments where it's always 72 degrees. It's either heated to 72 or cooled to 72 degrees. The vast majority of trips, something like 97% of trips in America, are taken by car or planes. We don't walk nearly as much. And it turns out that the hardship involved with growing our own food and making it our own food involved the physical activity and the connection to nature and the connection to the ground and the control of ingredients that make a huge difference of how healthy we are. Just the act of walking If you live in a car-centric city like Phoenix or Atlanta, people there only get about 4,000 steps a day. But if you live in a less car-centric city like Santa Barbara or Boulder or New York, for example, people get 10,000 extra steps a day or 10,000 steps a day. Now, the difference of that is huge. So for every extra 1,000 steps you walk per day, your mortality risk goes down by about 11%. And that's huge. That's several years of life expectancy over time. And the beauty of those are years you kind of get without even thinking about it. And that's the result of exposing yourself to the opposite of ease. I don't just, get in my car and drive to work. No, I go put on a jacket, put on my comfortable sneakers, and I walk to work, or I walk to my friend's house or out to eat. These are things that make an enormous difference, and they're right in front of us, and we completely forget about it.
Yeah. So let's go into the ethos of Blue Zones, like what the main pillars are, and then we can break down.
Yes. So we found 5 Blue Zones. I talked about Okinawa. The longest lived men in the world are from Sardinia, Italy. The longest lived women, Okinawa. There's an island in Greece called Ikaria where people live about 8 years longer with no discernible dementia, which makes it interesting. In Nicoya, Costa Rica, it's an area with the lowest rate of middle-age mortality, which means people have about a 2-fold better chance of reaching age 100. And then among Americans, not too far from here, Loma Linda, California, highest concentration of Seventh-day Adventists. And those adherent Christians out there, they live about 7 years longer than people in the next county over. So those are the 5 Blue Zones. Now, something called the Danish Twin Study established that only about 20% of how long we live is dictated by our genes. And what does that mean? It means if our parents died young, we're not necessarily doomed to die young. And by the same token, if parents lived to 90, it doesn't mean we're going to automatically live to 90. So the point is, it's something other than genes that explains longevity. And I thought, what better place to look for those things tend to find the places where people have achieved the outcomes we want, which is live a long time without diabetes, without cardiovascular disease, without obesity, without dementia. And so Blue Zones was really about finding those common denominators. And your question was about the ethos. I thought I'd forget about it, didn't you know? But coming back around to your question, Kelly, the best way to think about it is there's an operating system and there's a program. And the programs involve eating mostly a whole food, plant-based diet. People in Blue Zones, 90 to 95% of what they put in their mouth is whole plant-based food. They do eat meat only about 5 times a month. They don't exercise. We think the answer to physical activity is going to the gym or CrossFit or Pilates. That has been an unmitigated failure in the United States. We've been pushing exercise since the Eisenhower administration, yet the average American, there's only about 25% of Americans get 20 minutes of physical activity. The other 75% don't even get that. So it ain't working. Exercise ain't working. We hound people to get exercise. In Blue Zones, people move naturally. We all know that stress prematurely ages us, lowers our life expectancy, et cetera. People in Blue Zones suffer the same stresses we do. They worry about their kids. They worry about their finances. They worry about their health. But what they have that we've forgotten are sacred daily rituals that unwind that stress. The Okinawans have this beautiful practice of ancestor veneration where in their living room, they'll have 3 or 4 shelves, and on the shelves will be a picture of their favorite grandma and her comb and an urn with grandpa's ashes and these other things that remind them of their ancestors. And they'll take 15 minutes a day to remember where they came from. Remember that they're not just a point in time, but part of a continuum. And they'll take some time to relinquish their day to their ancestors who they believe are looking after them. The Adventists pray. They get up and pray, which is like a meditation. The Costa Ricans and the Icarians, very fastidious about a nap. Naps are very powerful ways to de-stress. They lower cortisol levels. They lower your chance of cardiovascular disease. And in Sardinia, they do happy hour. Which is, I've adopted that one with some zeal. But the point is that stress is part of the human condition. And we're not going to get rid of stress. Somebody's going to cut you off in traffic. Your partner's going to do some stupid shit that makes you angry all the time. But where we have power is dealing with that. And the best way I argue to deal with is have these daily rituals that we know unwind. And Blue Zones give us a really good program for that. People in Blue Zones have a sense of purpose. They belong to communities or groups of people where they find meaning. Okinawa, they have a word for it, ikigai. But they wake up in the morning like you do. You wake up in the morning and you have your daughter and she's central. You walk her to school, which I applaud you for. Then you want to stay physically fit. You go play tennis. You got this great podcast. You know, just think if you woke up in the morning and didn't know what to do with yourself.
Yeah.
You're going to turn on the Today Show or some gossip show. Just think about how your life would feel without that purpose. We don't think about purpose as a longevity supplement, but we know that people who can articulate their sense of purpose live about 8 years longer than people who are rudderless in life. It's a very strong ethos. And, you know, we talk about purpose today quite a bit. But when I first wrote the first Blue Zone book in 2008, nobody used to talk about purpose. And I'd bring it up in interviews and people kind of roll their eyes. But now there are very good studies that follow people for decades and find that people who can articulate their purpose have lower rates of cardiovascular disease and lower rates of dementia.
I mean, it seems like in these communities, they're smaller, maybe more insulated. It's like their purpose isn't, you know, because I know a lot of people listening to this podcast are like searching for their purpose and like, I found mine. And it's just adding value to the community in some way. It's not some big global purpose. It's like, right? So
that's right. The best way to think about purpose, I believe, is to get really clear on your values. And I actually have this sort of exercise I ask people to do, either with a computer screen or even just a journal. And you make 4 columns. And the first column is values. And you write down, I believe in animal rights, or I'm a Christian, or I'm a Republican, or I'm a liberal, or I care about women, whatever it is, write it down. Second column, what do I do well? I'm good at diffusing conflict. I'm good at the first idea. I'm good at caretaking, whatever it is. I'm good at fixing shit, whatever it is, you write that down. Then the third column is, what do you like to do? What gives you passion? What, you might be good at writing, but you might kind of hate it, and maybe you love to bike. Whatever it is, you list them, get it in front of you, get 3 full columns. And then in that 4th column is where do they all come together and you can put it to work. So I'm guessing this podcast, you're a healer and you're a curious mind and you like to make the people around you feel better and have a richer life. This is a perfect convergence. And I'm not sure how you came to this idea, but this exercise for people who don't know what they're doing, this is a good one. It takes 15 minutes and it's not so hard to do.
Yeah, that's really good and practical. To answer your question, this came about, I did the documentary, it became a book. After the book was ready to come out, I was like, okay, I've given birth to a baby, I've given birth to a documentary, I've given birth to a book. I am exhausted. My creative juice
Which one hurt
gone.
the most?
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely natural childbirth. But yeah, and I was like, okay, I'm going to promote the book for 3 months and then or 2 months even. And then I'm hanging it up. I'm going to take a 6-month nap and check out and recover and just be with my daughter. And then literally like 2 weeks later, the world shut down with COVID. And I'm sitting there going, okay, wow, I'm a really good manifester. Now I really get my rest because we're all on lockdown, right? But then very shortly after, like a month in, I realized that people were in a lot of fear, and I had a just completely different. I'd been researching the immune system for a decade, and really, there was the fear of the unknown because there was a lot of sensationalism around the virus, and there was real people dying and stuff. But I just had this like different perspective, and so I started the podcast to like anchor people and remind them of their incredible adaptability and resilience and intelligence of the immune system in their bodies. And so by obligation and service, I got into this. And then, people liked it. So, and then I started liking it.
Yes. And you're thriving,
Yeah.
as far as I can tell, in this environment because you're putting your purpose to work.
Yeah, thanks.
And by the way, you bring up a really good point. Most of the vocabulary for purpose in blue zones isn't just about sort of self-fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
There's always an altruistic, there's always a dimension of it that helps others, their family or their community. And I think true purpose, that really soul-satisfying purpose, has to have a benefit somebody besides yourself.
Totally. And, you talk about that. It's like when you give to others, when people are stuck in healing, sometimes their attention is so focused on themselves and their problem and the woe is me, which is understandable because you're dealing with something very scary or overwhelming or painful. But when I've talked to many, many people and scientists and healers that say once they guide the person to take the attention off themselves and give to someone else and help someone else, that unlocks the vitality within them. And that's congruent with what you're saying about these communities because they're giving, it's altruistic, they're volunteering in their community and giving back. And that unleashes this vitality, which makes them live longer. So can you talk about the medicinal value of volunteering?
Yes. And by the way, we're going the wrong way in America right now. This whole let's make ourselves great and screw everybody else. It's such a bad ethos in my opinion. We know that volunteers, for example, there's a Columbia scientist named Linda Fried who actually followed groups of older people who volunteer. And the volunteer had to be something meaningful. In this case, it was reading to children in schools. So they volunteer their time. So she looked at that group and then a control group, a group of similar older people who didn't volunteer. And she found the group who volunteered had weighed less, they had lower rates of cardiovascular disease and actually lower healthcare costs. So a very clear manifestation of the power of altruism, of giving. And in all these blue zones, I was just in one last week in Sardinia, and they on St. Francis Day, everybody in the village named Francis, it's either Francesco or Francesca, they throw a party for the rest of the whole village. And this is a village of 2,000 people, and there was 35 of them, 35 people named Francesca or Francesco. And they spend all year and they gather up money. And then in this sort of hilltop sort of plateau field, they cooked up 6 goats. So they had this sort of goat soup, and then they had roasted goat. And all these tables they set, and then they served the whole village goat. but it was, they loved it. But it was so beautiful that all these people, of course, all your waiters and waitresses are named Frank or Francis. But it was such a clear manifestation, and there was so much joy there. And the people doing the serving were more happy than I think the people doing the eating. And it turns out that the act of altruism stimulates the same neural pathways as sugar does and as cocaine does. So it's addictive. So you're not only doing something for others, which feels good, you're doing something for yourself. You're getting your own little oxytocin buzz from doing good. It's this beautiful virtuous circle. And again, nobody talks about volunteering in the sort of longevity bro world of rapamycin and metformin. No, just go out and do something nice for people. It will show up on your life expectancy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what you give comes back tenfold, and that's one way.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you go volunteer, you lose weight. I mean, that sounds like a good
We don't know why, but it's an association. It might be all the things you do around that volunteering. It might be because you're focusing on others. You're not thinking about eating Doritos but it really does work.
It does feel good. When you give, it feels good. And when you feel good, you make better choices, right? There's so much confusion around diet. For instance, you don't eat meat. Some of these people eat meat, the plant paradox, and then the whole food plant-based diet. Shine some light on how you navigate that confusion with your audience and your followers and the people that...
Right. So I aggregate science. And if you want to know what...
Everybody claims they aggregate the science, but then they all
You're
say
right.
different
You're right.
things.
Yeah, you can support any point of view with some scientific paper. But I've gone a step. It's harder to support a fringe belief with a meta-analysis. So meta-analysis is a lot of scientific studies that are kind of averaged out around a topic. So my approach, I'm interested in a diet that will get you to a healthy age 100. And if you want to know what a 100-year-old ate to live to be 100, you have to know what she was eating as a little girl. Chocolate pancakes. And
We're not starting off well in this household.
You have to know what she ate at middle age and newly retired and lately. You can't just ask a centenarian, what do you eat? Because they don't remember. If I asked you, what did you have for dinner a week ago Tuesday? Could you tell me?
Oh, God. No.
Most people can't. So how can you ask a centenarian, what did you eat to live to be 100? They don't know. But universities and governments have done, over the past 80, 90 years, in all 5 blue zones, dietary surveys where they're done in a range of ways, but the least strong ones just ask people to self-report what they've eaten over a 2-week period, and they can remember pretty well, at least the last 48 or 36 hours. The better ones, they actually put a researcher who goes and lives in people's houses and watches exactly what they eat and weighs it. In fact, the Mediterranean diet, that's how rigorous the Mediterranean diet was recorded. But I worked with Harvard, a scientist named Walter Willett, and we aggregated 155 dietary surveys done in all 5 blue zones over the last 90 years. And when you average it out, it's very clear. And all 5 blue zones, the trend is the same. They're eating mostly whole food, plant-based. I mentioned before, meat 5 times a month. But the 5 pillars of every longevity diet in the world are whole grains, corn, rice, and wheat, a staple in all. And by the way, I know we tend to malign rice, but the 15 countries with the highest healthy life expectancy all eat white rice every day. So go figure. A second component is greens or garden vegetables. A third component is tubers, potatoes and sweet potatoes especially. In Okinawa, 70% of their calories came from purple sweet potatoes until 1980 or something. Nuts, a handful of nuts a day actually is associated with 2 extra years of life expectancy. And the cornerstone of every longevity diet in the world is beans. So they're getting protein not from beef, not from chicken or pork or some, soy isolate that they put in their smoothie. They're eating a cup of beans a day. So when I sort of promote a Blue Zones diet, I'm just saying, well, here's what the longest lived people ate their whole life. They didn't develop cardiovascular disease or 40% cancers or dementia. You might want to think about it too.
Mm-hmm. And to go levels deeper, it's probably they're not, some of these are poorer cultures, so they're not eating a ton of food. So they're like the actual, like in America, we're burdening our system with a bunch of crap and it's too much food. And so I don't know if you could speak to like fasting windows or just because they just eat less because they eat, till they're hungry. They don't have an excess amount of things and they eat local, what's available locally and what's in season. Like it's just like the natural way of eating.
I call it a peasant diet. You're right. These are all fairly poor people. And the foods they can afford are, kind of the things you find at the bottom of the grocery shelves for $2 a pound. They're very cheap things. But they know how to make them delicious. Their genius comes not in how, some food scientist formulates a Dorito. Their genius comes in how they take these very simple peasant foods and combine them and add certain herbs and spices, and how they cook them and bake them and make them taste delicious. So they look forward to eating the way we do. And they have every bit the appetite we do. If you put food in front of them, they'd eat the same stuff we do. It just so happens in their environment, the cheapest, most accessible, and most delicious food is this food that has kind of evolved over the millennia to use local ingredients to taste really good. They're not making choices as much as they're doing what their grandmother's doing. And the reason they're not overeating, part of it, you're right, they don't always have an abundance of calories, but their food is nutritionally dense and calorically light. So, you go to you have an Okinawa stir fry. They call it Goya champuru. And it's like this glistening, delicious compost pile of food. It's tofu and these root fat, and it's delicious. And you just eat, and you're just smiling and happy, and your stomach's getting full, and you can't believe you're eating all this food. And you walk away from the table and you've consumed fewer calories than a small hamburger, and 50 times the nutrients. And that's the secret. The secret's not starving ourselves or depriving ourselves. It's getting these foods that are calorically rich, nutrient rich, calorically light, and satiating. And just to put a plug in, all my Blue Zone Kitchen foods do exactly that.
Maniacally delicious.
I love it. You've learned.
They're in the freezer section at your local grocery store.
Yes, Whole Foods and everything.
Yes. So Ikaria, the dementia thing is really like top of mind because we all have kind of aging parents and we want to keep their minds sharp. What's the secret there? Like, is it really good olive oil from Greece? Like, how do we keep our parents' minds sharp and our own minds?
So something like 70% of all dementia is avoidable. We're so focused on the cure, that pharmaceutical that's going to reverse brain plaques. Forget all that. It may come, it may not come. The reason we know there's no dementia on Ikaria is because we brought a team from the University of Athens and we interviewed everybody on that island over age 65, and we gave them the same cognitive test that the National Institute on Aging gives older people here. And we found only 3 very mild cases of dementia, no full-blown Alzheimer's. So we know they've achieved the outcomes we want. So then trying to explain it is a little harder. I can't give you a cause, but I can tell you a number of things that are going on there that are probably associated. First of all, it's a very steep environment. So just walking to get your loaf of bread in the morning, or your friends' occasions a walk up a hill. They're not, getting in their attached garage and driving to work. They're walking. They all have gardens. They make very liberal use of the herbs that grow wild. It's the kind of shit that we would squirt Roundup on. They're picking it. They're steaming it. They're adding lemon and olive oil. They're steaming and baking into these wonderful pies. And they're things like dandelion. Dandelion is very edible, and it's actually a diuretic. Fennel tops, which we tend to throw away and cook the bulbs. Those are very high in antioxidants. There was wild mustards. An older lady there can identify about 80 species, which just grow on the side of the road. And they make liberal use of them. So a lot of these greens, many of which have 8 to 10 times the antioxidants that red wine do. They have very strong families. The idea of putting an aging parent in a retirement home would shame the family. So instead of putting grandma in a retirement home where she has very little stimulation, it's the nurse and she's watching TV all day long, grandma lives at home. Grandma helps raise the grandchild. Grandma is in charge of cooking. Grandma runs the garden. So her mind stays sharp, and she's being told all the time, we need you. You're important. That makes a huge difference over time. What else can I? Oh, they drink herbal teas, rosemary, oregano, thyme, and a catnip, mint tea. And we had all of these teas analyzed, and it turns out they're all antioxidants, they all have very high levels of antioxidants, but they're also anti-inflammatory. So the root of every age-related disease is inflammation. Either you get it from eating shitty food, or you get it from being chronically stressed out.
The environmental toxins that are...
Environmental toxins. Or, another thing that people don't talk about, working out too much. You run a marathon, or you run 10 miles or 5 miles, or go pump iron too much. The next morning you feel sore. That's inflammation. And too much of that also adds to the inflammation load, which shows up as higher heart cardiovascular disease when you're older. These older people aren't feeling that. Families don't feel as much stress because they're living as a smaller community. And I know there's dysfunctional families and so forth, but they just seem to do a better job at doing family than we do.
Yeah, and it seems like as you're speaking, this old village kind of structure is much more conducive to keeping the family together, whereas now technology and these car-centric cities design and planning just isolates people. Everybody's far away in their own little houses, and that isolation leads to that breakdown of the kind of greater family structure and purpose and value of the elders.
That's right. And this all is less a function of a lack of good behavior. It's so much more a function of environment. If you live in a soulless suburb, at the end of a cul-de-sac, your opportunity to spontaneously bump into people or to find enough people you're really interested in without having to get in your car and drive is really low. But when you live in a place like, Manhattan Beach here, where you walk outside and you see neighbors all over the place, and 2 blocks away, there's a great little coffee shop and nice restaurants where you can go have dinner, you're way more likely to make those social connections. I in fact worked here in the beach cities from 2010 to 2015. I was hired by the Beach City Health District here to change the environment, to raise life expectancy, and to raise happiness. And this sounds like empire. You can never do that. Well, for 5 years, we very methodically looked at the roads here, and there were no bike paths here. And we did a really concerted effort to work with the governments of Hermosa Beach, Manhattan Beach, and Redondo Beach. And we put in 220 miles of bike paths here.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, and walking path. And that gets people out of their cars where they have zero social interaction, on their feet where they have some. And over time, they have a lot. When we arrived here, I think there's 7 schools in the Beach City. Almost no kids walk to school. We put in these safe routes to school and these walking school buses where we got older volunteers. We did a sort of background check on them with the police. And older people would wait at corners, and you live close, your child lives close to school, but a lot of people live several blocks, and parents are afraid of traffic, and they're afraid of somebody to snatch my child. But when you have an older trusted person who's going to kind of walk in front of them, we call it a walking school bus, all of a sudden we got about 30% of, over time, 30% of kids walking to school. And when you're walking to school, you can kind of talk to that boy you like or that girl you like, and when you can't often do in classroom. So instead of trying an app or pushing people together or wagging your finger at people, you need to get socially connected. You create the environment where it happens spontaneously. And that's what works. And that getting to the operating system. The operating system of Blue Zones is you don't try to hound or incent or guilt people into changing their behaviors, because it does not work in the long run. I defy you or anybody listening to tell me about one thing that more than 10% of people, more than 5% of people will do, behavior change, after 2 years. You get people to go on a diet for 3 months or 6 months, but they all drop off. You can talk people into going to the gym, but for 85 or 88% of them, they stop going to the gym by September. after 9 months. So we keep marketing these things that make money for people, but they don't really change. They don't really keep you doing the right things for long enough so you don't develop heart disease, type 2 diabetes, dementia, or about 40% of cancers.
And you're doing this now in other cities around the country. You're changing the environment, and then the outcomes are pretty substantial. Like you said, it's like making different, better choices available for people and giving them the avenue to walk. I mean, everybody's walking here, their dogs all the time,
So this is checkable. When we came in 2010, stayed for 5 years, Gallup measured, and the rate of obesity or the BMI went down by 19%.
That's significant.
In 125,000 people, that means about 1,900 fewer obese people. It means about 900 fewer heart attacks, 600 fewer cases of type 2 diabetes. That's way more than doctors have done. And it simply was setting up people's environments so the healthy choice is the easy choice. I don't know if they're still there, but we had 550 Blue Zone certified restaurants in the beach cities. And these are restaurants that just agreed to make sure there was one whole food plant-based entree on their menu. They agreed not to automatically fill up your soda, sugar, sweetened beverages are biggest source of refined sugar in our diet. The status quo is they keep them full because soda's almost free. In Blue Zone's certified restaurants, you had to ask. You didn't automatically get served bread and butter when you sat down, but you could ask for the bread and butter. There's lots of behavioral economic tweaks you can do to the eating environment to engineer out 200 calories of just dumb eating and
nudges and defaults.
Correctamundo.
So give a couple of little ditties for the audience that they could do.
All right. So for your house, and by the way, I wrote a book called The Blue Zone Challenge where I aggregated about 30 of these evidence-based nudge that you can use to set up your home or your kitchen or your commute or your social network. But for your kitchen, these are actually from studies. If you have a toaster on your counter, after 6 years, you'll weigh about 3 more pounds. After 3 years, you'll weigh 6 more pounds than the same person that doesn't have a toaster on their counter.
Wow.
Why? Because most of us are on a seafood diet. We see food, we eat it. So a toaster prompts us to put something in our toaster when we walk through the kitchen. And there's very little we put in our toaster that produces a healthy outcome. Same with salty chips. You see these clips, you put your salty chip, put those away. I'm not saying you can't eat salty chips, but if you put them down low in a junk food drawer or around the corner in a pantry, you're not prompted to eat them every time you walk through your kitchen. It makes a huge difference over time. People who have cereal on their counter, cereal is generally an unhealthy way to start your breakfast. Almost all of them have more salt and or sugar than crappy snacks. Cheerios has more salt than potato chips do. People don't know that.
Wow.
And it's just a bad way to start your day. If you have a cereal box people with a cereal box on their counter weigh more than 10 pounds more over about a 5-year period than people who don't have cereal boxes on their counter. So my approach is not to guilt you for having Fruit Loops. My approach is say, all right, if you have Fruit Loops, put them in your pantry. Instead, put out a fruit bowl. And the one thing I want you to do per week is keep the fruit bowl full. And the fruit bowl in the middle of your table, well lit, is going to remind you, that's there for a purpose. Mm-hmm. Keep that full. So you're mindless. Your default is an apple or an orange or grapes or a banana, whatever it is. That makes a difference over time.
So a lot of these, I'm really interested in Loma Linda, and we'll get into which of these places are still thriving as blue zones and which are kind of deteriorating with the modernization of all of our wonderful practices here in America. But Loma Linda is just down the road. What are the things that the Seventh-day Adventists do? Is it just that
you got that right.
village community? They're still holding that together. Is it their faith? Is it their rituals? Is it their diet? I don't even know anything about the community. but I want to duplicate it.
The 4 other blue zones are mostly geographical blue zones, but this one is mostly a cultural blue zone. So the Adventist, an adherent Adventist, from Friday night sundown till Saturday night sundown, they stay home. The kids aren't going to football practice or dance lessons. Teenagers aren't going out and partying. They stay home and have dinner with the family. The TV's off. They go to bed early. Saturday morning, they're not going out and playing. They are going to church. Saturday afternoon, they're having lunch. We're having potluck lunch with other members of their church, their friends. Saturday afternoon, hardwired right in their scriptures, is a nature walk. They do it every Saturday. The result of this is a nice ritual that goes on for decades, not just, during the fun run period or this year I'm going to run a marathon and then, you hurt your ankle and you never do it again. This is a long-term ritualistic thing that people dependably do for decades. That's the key. But also it creates, about 90% of their friends are other Adventists because, their kids can't go out on Friday night and the church is really strict. And so they tend to hang out with other Adventists, and that reinforces the right behavior. You go to an Adventist party, nobody's doing a line of blow and smoking a bong. They're talking about their church gathering. So, people tend to not indulge in as many risky behaviors and more healthy behaviors. It's not my cup of tea, but you can see how.
You're more of a blow bong guy. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I'm not going to say it out loud. But they also take their diet directly from the Bible. Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 29. I'm not a big Bible reader, but I read it for this story. God lays out very clearly the diet of the Garden of Eden. I always thought somebody should capitalize on that. Diet of the Garden of Eden. Oh, hell, I'll eat that. But she says it's every tree that bears fruit. So what's that? Apples and citrus and avocados and tomatoes. And then one stanza later, she goes on to say every plant that bears seed. So what's that? Well, grains and nuts and seeds and beans. And then one stanza later, she says green plants. So the Adventists actually do that. Most Adventists are vegetarian. There's, some that eat meat, or eggs and cheese, but most of them are vegan or pescatarian. And they do that for a lifetime. Why? Because it's part of their belief, but everybody around them is. You go to a Adventist potluck, there's not, sloppy joes or some, dead animal rib. They're eating a delicious, they call them haystacks, kind of a fake meatloaf, or a delicious soup or stew that's made out of beans and vegetables. And so they're automatically, mindlessly eating this healthy way for a long time. And that adds up. And lo and behold, you look at the Adventist Health Study that followed 103,000 Adventists for 30 years. And the most adherent Adventists are living 7 years longer than the people the next village over, San Bernardino, or their California counterparts, actually. Mm-hmm. So, I just offer that as evidence.
And I think I heard you mention that the Costa Rica Blue Zone now has like fast food cropping up. So we're losing. How do we keep the Blue Zones alive? Is that your mission with the city kind of transformations, or what's happening in the landscape today?
Yes. So, yes, the reason America is overweight, and 70% of us are overweight, 80% of us have metabolic disease, not because we're bad people or we're lack discipline or individual responsibility. And I say that because in 1980, there were a third as many people obese and a seventh as many people with type 2 diabetes. And I'm not a worse person than my parents are, but my parents lived in a different environment. My parents lived in an environment where there was about 1/20th as many fast food restaurants. They spent less than half the amount of time people now spend in their cars. So they were on their feet walking. They didn't have handheld devices to entertain them. They went over to the neighbor's house My mom played cards with the neighbors and bowled with the neighbors. So people today are unhealthy and overweight and sick. It's not their fault. It's our environment's fault. So based on that insight, the Blue Zones Project, we get hired by insurance companies to come in and not scold people, but we subtly come in with what I call policy bundles, the best practices for favoring the pedestrian and cyclist over the motorist, for favoring healthy food over junk food and junk food marketing, for favoring the non-smoker over the smoker. And we can usually go in with these policy menus to city council and say, I think most of you here, Mr. Mayor and City Council and Chamber of Commerce and Big C, I think most of you would like to see your children grow up healthier, and everybody's heads nod. And I'd say, I'm not going to make you do anything here. I'm not going to, railroad down your throats that you need to impose a soda tax, which works, but it's not right for most cities. But I'll give you 30 other ways to pass these policies so people are mindlessly moving more, mindlessly eating better, mindlessly smoking less. And you look at the Gallup data here in the beach cities, and you'll see about a 25% drop in smoking in the time we're here. You can't smoke on, not that you ever would, Kelly, but you can't smoke on the Strand anymore. And by the way, if you do, there are police that will write you a ticket. That didn't happen. Manhattan Beach is smoke-free because of our Blue Zones project, not because we railroaded down people's throat. We tried it first in Manhattan Beach, and we got the pier here to agree, all the restaurants. They did it begrudgingly. They tried it and they realized, well, I didn't lose business by going smoke-free. And then I was able to come up to the businesses here in Manhattan Beach and say, look, it didn't hurt, one beach down, didn't hurt them to go non-smoking. And then they did it. So it's this methodical changing of the environment to set people up for success.
Yes.
And in most cities, and now in the Blue Zone in Costa Rica, they're increasingly set up for failure because they're surround sound, burgers and fries and pizzas and chips and sodas and candy bars and all the shit that we know causes chronic. It's not even associated. It causes type 2 diabetes. It causes cardiovascular disease. It causes dementia. And it causes about 60% of the cancers that will foreshorten our lives. What's going to make America healthier and live longer is connecting us socially, helping us move naturally, making it easier and more delicious to eat low on the food chain, not say you can't have meat, and to make sure people feel they have a sense of purpose, which includes giving back. There's more research for those four things than any rapamycin or metformin, and it not only delivers a longer life, it delivers a happier life. And that's what we all want.
I mean, if you didn't wrap it up and put a bow on it with that,
Boom.
boom. Very good. Well, thank you. And, as you encourage us to cook more at home, and I need to do that better. I'm very excited about your one-pot meals, Blue Zones Kitchen. Got to try that minestrone soup.
Thank you very much. Incidentally, I worked with Stanford, and we examined 650,000 recipes, and we found the ones that Americans love the most, and we distilled their 7 flavor patterns that Americans love. And then we built that book. We kind of reverse engineered deliciousness.
Okay.
So we know what Americans love, and all the recipes are in there. They're not all one pot, but they're all quick to make, and they're all maniacally delicious. And the first week it came out, it was a New York Times bestseller. And that was just a month ago.
Wow.
So.
Well, that's amazing.
I always say the New York Times bestseller. Minnesotans don't like to brag, but I just know that people are more likely to pick it up if they know it's a bestseller.
Minnesotans don't like to brag. I love
No, tall tree gets chopped down in Minnesota.
Yeah, I get it. Well, this all looks delicious. Broccoli and lemon risotto, chewy oatmeal chocolate chip cookies. I am very excited. So, well, thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. This is a blast.
All right.
We'll see you when you're 100. And by the way, for people who are listening, if they have more questions of me, I'm at Dan Buettner on Instagram, and I answer all my own messages. So if you want to DM me, I will answer you.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Dan.
All right.